We live in a very strange world. Our world around us is full of narcissism, selfishness, egotism, selfieism, and self-fulfillment. And because we have that need for being self-fulfilled and happy, we will do anything to fulfill that need. And so what we do is we have an empty heart. And our heart is empty because we haven't filled it with the things that it should be filled with. And that goes back to when we were children, perhaps, when we first formed our personalities and we grew up and we discovered who we are. And when we discovered who we are, we found out that we were sometimes not always appreciated, sometimes we got bullied, sometimes we just didn't get it right. And so you build a shell around you and you learn how not to communicate in a healthy way. And you make choices that aren't healthy either. But you need to fulfill that sense of loneliness, that sense of not being happy with something else. So, what do? Somebody offers you a joint, and you say, sure, I'll try it. And you do. And the first joint, well, that was just an experiment. But then you kind of like the experience. Somehow it gave you a buzz, and you got turned on. And then you said, well, couldn't hurt me, so I'll try it again. And whether you do it with drugs, or you do it with alcohol, you do it with sex, you do it with the internet, or any other thing that you start to fill your life with, it will become for you a satisfaction. And what that does is it changes the amygdala of your brain, the pleasure centers of your brain. And a chemical activity occurs in your brain that will now ask you to be satisfied with this. And once you start, it'll level off and you'll need some more. So that first joint or that first drink or that first gamble or that first sexual experience will become more. The cravings will become greater. And when that craving becomes so much so that you can't control it, you're an addict. And addiction is what's destroying this country today. And maybe it's not your fault. Maybe circumstances have driven you into this. Or you took a drug that was perfectly legitimate for medical reasons, and it did the same thing. Addiction is a horrible experience because addiction leads to death, physical death, spiritual death, psychological death, financial death. It leads to darkness, despair, and in some cases, even suicide. Addiction is something that we have to handle today if we're going to solve the problems of our society. So, how do you get around getting out of addiction? It's one of the hardest things in the world because there's a psychological experience that says if you do something for 6 weeks on a regular basis, then it becomes habitual. And that's what happens. We don't even know we're doing these things over and over again, and finally we can't control them. They control us. And that's addiction, being controlled about some other thing, be it drugs or alcohol or sex or whatever, as I said. That addiction has to be broken if we are to really live our lives, because addiction destroys us. Addiction kills us. So how do we solve addiction? We have to get down and face ourselves for who we really are. We need to take the time to confront yourself, if you are an addicted person from any of these reasons, and do a hardcore search of yourself to say, who am I? What do I want in life? And I want to get out of this hell. And that's all addiction is. Hell is addiction. And the only way you can get out of that is to undo all that you did in making that a habit. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, It takes tremendous amount of willpower. And you can't do it on your own. You can go to Alcoholics Anonymous or Drug Anonymous or Sex Anonymous or whatever you need. That is a support group. But you have to choose to stop that addiction. And the only one who can do that is you. And it comes to having the will to do it. So where do you get that will? It's not easy. You're being controlled by your mind, which is not even in your control anymore because you turned it over to your addiction. Well, there is an answer, but it's up to you to choose. And the answer is to choose the person in your life who can get you out of that addiction. And that's God. He loves you. He made you for no other reason than to be his child, son and daughter. And he wants you to be that best son and daughter you could ever be. Yeah, you made mistakes. We all make mistakes. But he wants you and he loves you and he doesn't want to see you in this condition. And he will give you the grace that you need to get out of it. You just have to say yes to him. When you get to the pits of addiction and there's nowhere else to go, and you say the only way out is to end it all, oh no, that doesn't end anything. It just begins something that you'll never get out of, because suicide only leads to eternal damnation. You have to turn yourself around and get back to being a person who can be filled with what's positive in your life. Not all these negative things that are pulling you down and tearing you down and destroying you and saying you're worthless. Because when you get addicted, you are worthless to yourself. And you're worthless to everybody else. You've destroyed your life, you've destroyed your family, you've destroyed your friends, you've destroyed society. And you need a responsibility. And you can say, how can I be saved? I'm such a sinner. We're all sinners. Every one of us is a sinner. No one of us walks this earth that isn't. But we all have redemption. And God is out there holding his hands to us and saying, no matter how decrepit and how sad and how sorrowful your life is, I hold you in the palm of my hands. Will you believe that? And until you believe that you're a child of God who loves you, who calls you into being, who makes you, and the only reason you're here right now is because he is loving you, you will never get rid of that addiction. So when addiction comes into your life, it is, no matter what it is, face it. Face it for what it's worth. Control of you. Once you become addicted, you're no longer in control of your life. So you have to face it, choose what is good, surrender your life to the God who loves you, who can change you, who can take rid of that addiction and make it unhabitual and make the only habit that you have is to go to God. Yes, get high on God. Let him fill you and have the euphoria that you could never get from anything this material or any other way. Yes, God loves you, he wants you, and you can solve your problem. Surrender to him, trust in him, and let him love you.